Hey there, this is Dane from featherprop.com. Thanks for dialing in today. Are we in the end times? That's the question that I'd like to take a look at here today. But before we get into today's topic, I want to just say welcome to the new subscribers to this channel, and thank you for clicking the little subscribe button. Also, thank you to everyone who takes the time to click the like button and to comment down below. Doing those things is like casting a vote for the video, making it more accessible to other viewers. So thank you. Thank you very much. In some recent videos, I discussed some end-time topics and scriptures and explained a little bit of how I understand eschatology, which is the study of final things. The question was then posed to me if I believe that we are presently in the end times. Well, first let me point out that there hasn't been a generation of Christians who hasn't thought that they were in the end times. Christians throughout the ages have looked around them and then up at the sky and felt that they were about to see Christ's return. Many Christians did this because they felt that the conditions that they were recurred for them were as bad as it could ever get. And some of these conditions were, in fact, pretty bad. For instance, in the first century, Caesar Nero was imprisoning believers, and it was reported that he was dipping them in oil, tying them to poles, setting fire to them while still alive, and then walking through his garden to enjoy the evening lights. So if you were living in the first century, it would be hard to imagine a time worse than that. Some of those Christians thought they were living in the last days. Of course, things continued to get worse, or at least on a more widespread basis. Various Roman emperors like Diocletian really stepped things up for Christians, really throughout his entire Roman Empire. Irenaeus, a church father who wrote in the 2nd century, seemed to think that his generation may have been in the final days. Throughout history, Christians continued to suffer at the hands of various kings and governments. Sometimes they suffered at the hands of other Christians. For example, Roman Catholics tortured and killed many followers of Jesus, such as the Waldensians and the Hussites. Then, after the Reformation, both Roman Catholics and Lutherans joined forces to persecute and kill the Anabaptists. Later, Marxist and communist governments imprisoned, tortured, and martyred countless followers of Jesus. All of these Christians throughout the centuries might say that the times they lived in were the most terrible. And it's hard to disagree with them. They were all terrible. In fact, we Christians in the modern West really have no clue how difficult times can be for a Christian. But Christian persecution isn't the only thing that caused Christians to believe that they were living in the last times. Oftentimes, Christians looked at the general despondence of their day and felt like theirs was the worst of times. And there has been no shortage of suggested antichrists. Martin Luther identified Pope Leo as the Antichrist. Napoleon Bonaparte was a contender for the title, and of course, Hitler made many people's lists. More recently, JFK seemed to be in the running, and here's one I personally can recall being talked about as the Antichrist back in the 70s, Henry Kissinger. These people were thought to be the Antichrist because Christians during those stages of history had thought that their own times were the last times. They believed they were the generation that would see the sky split and herald the return of Jesus. But each of these generations of Christians came and went without seeing what they had expected. They were not living in the end times. Over the years, many predictions were made of Christ's return, and each of these failed to come to pass. I can distinctly recall growing up in the 70s, and it's all that we talked about. We believed, because we were taught by dispensationalists, that we were the final generation. We were told by people like Hal Lindsey, for example, that Jesus would return within a generation of the restoration of the nation of Israel, which occurred in 1948. And here we are, some 70 years later, and still no return. Yet the predictions have not ceased. Some of you may recall not too many years ago that Harold Camping predicted the rapture would occur on May 21st, 2011. At the close of that day, he discovered that he was wrong, and so he bumped the date to September of that year and missed that one too. Of course, YouTube is alive with predictions, dreams, and warnings that the rapture is about to take place. Each of these Christians, like the many who came before them, feel like they are living in the end times. Each of these Christians, like the many who came before them, have predicted that the time is near. Now, one of the passages that I hear cited in demonstration of the soon return of Jesus is a reference to the days of Noah. It is often said that Jesus predicted that just prior to his return, we would see violence and increased sin, just like as in the days of Noah. Since I had already mentioned Hal Lindsey, let me show you how he understands this passage from Matthew.
Jesus said, "As the days of Noah were, so also will be the coming of the Son of Man." Genesis 6:11 says that in the days of Noah, the earth was filled with violence. Last week in Germany.
So Hal Lindsey suggests that we will see violence as in the days of Noah, just prior to Jesus' return. However, Hal didn't read the entire passage of what Jesus had said. This is important because Jesus didn't mention violence at all. In Matthew 24, verses 37 through 40, we read, "As it was in the days of Noah, so it will be at the coming of the Son of Man. For in the days before the flood, people were eating and drinking, marrying and giving in marriage, up to the day Noah entered the ark. And they knew nothing about what would happen until the flood came and took them all away. That is how it will be at the coming of the Son of Man." As you can see, Hal Lindsey reads only verse 37 of this passage and then stops. He then interprets this for us. However, Hal doesn't have to do that because Jesus explained what he meant. And Jesus didn't say anything about violence or increased sin. Instead, the examples that he gave were far different. Jesus said that in Noah's days, just before the flood, people were eating, drinking, getting married, and giving their children away in marriage. It sounds like Jesus said that people were living normally. Their lives were routine. They were doing the things that they were always doing without any thought to the coming judgment. In Luke's version of the same account, Jesus also likens his coming to the days of Lot. In Luke 17:28, likewise as it was in the days of Lot, they ate, they drank, they bought, they sold, they planted, they built. As you can see, there's no mention of violence or sin. Rather, using the example Jesus himself gave, he seems to be saying, and I think very clearly, that prior to his return, people will be doing all the things that they always do, like eating, drinking, getting married, buying, selling, and building homes. The sign that Jesus gives us of his return here is that people will be living as they always do and not expecting judgment to come. But are there any other signs of Christ's return? Well, I think that there may be. In Revelation 20, which chapter I talked about in one of my previous videos about the 1,000-year reign of Christ, John writes that Satan will be bound. Now, without getting too much into my views again on that chapter, John tells us that near the end, Satan will be released for a little while. That's in verse 3, in order to deceive the nations, verse 8, and then make war on the beloved city, verse 9. The beloved city, I believe, is a reference to the New Jerusalem, which John identifies in the next chapter as the bride of Christ, or the church, not a literal city. So here's how I see it. Prior to Christ's return, Satan will be released from how he was bound at the cross. He will begin what I suspect will be an aggressive war of deception, and then turn those who have been deceived against the church. Therefore, as I understand, one of the signs that the time of Christ's return is near is a massive deception campaign which will signal to us that Satan has already been released. Of course, we don't know how long a little while is, so we could never say for sure how long the war of deception will last before Jesus returns. But it seems the deception will turn people's hearts against true believers. So has this started yet? Well, I'm not going to be dogmatic here because I don't know. But here's something to think about. There was a time when a false teacher could gather hundreds, maybe thousands of followers. And they would just move off to some compound to live by themselves. Or a false teacher would spout his or her doctrines, but hardly ever anyone would pay attention. Then came the internet. Suddenly, any person with a little know-how could publish a website and get their doctrine out into the mainstream much more easily. Then came social media, which has become the biggest platform for the fake news journalist. In addition to fictitious news articles downloaded right to the palms of our hands, we are now being bombarded with viral videos that are posted and reposted again and again. People are becoming inundated with doctrinally unsound material that they're not prepared to interact with. The false teacher has a platform that he could never have imagined in the old days. As I already mentioned, YouTube is alive with uninspired visions, false prophecies, and dreamers selling their wares to an audience who is only too eager to have their itching ears scratched. Is this a sign of the end? Well, let me repeat, I don't know. However, if the level of deception that we see flourishing now is before Satan is unbound, then God help us when it happens.